Senator Bernie Sanders is calling on Democrats to have the guts to court supporters of former President Donald Trump. The former presidential candidate made those statements Sunday on Meet the Press. He told Chuck Todd that people on top are doing incredibly well, but the working class is struggling.
Democrats should talk about the economy. I think they should contrast their views with the Republican positions. I believe, and most Democrats believe, that at a time when half our people live in paycheck to paycheck, we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage. No Republicans support that. I think we should make it easier for workers to join unions. Republicans don't support that. I believe that when you have billionaires not paying a nickel in some cases in federal income taxes, yeah, we should demand that the rich and large corporations start paying their fair share. Now, what Republicans are saying, Chuck, which is quite amazing to me, is that in the midst of these difficult economic times for seniors and for other people, you know what they say? We got to cut Social Security. We got to cut Medicare. We got to cut Medicaid. I think that that is grotesque, and I think Democrats have got to hold them accountable for those reactionary positions.
Well, the senator acknowledged that while some right-leaning voters are in fact unreachable, many working-class Americans backed President Trump because of their frustration with the economy. And according to a poll by Fox News, a majority of Americans want the government to, quote, lend me a hand. That's up 10 points in a year and up 19 points among Republicans. So I think Bernie is absolutely correct. And I mean, the numbers bear out that, you know, there are voters who are up for grabs in the Republican coalition if you talk about economic issues with them. We all know of there are Obama, Trump, Biden voters in the Midwest, in places like, I'm from Michigan, in places like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, everywhere. But in particular, those are important states for the Electoral College map. There are people who liked Obama and then did not feel that Hillary Clinton spoke to their needs, to their economic needs.
And were disappointed by Obama's actual tenure in office as opposed to the promises he ran on.
Yeah. And then there are people who I didn't like something about Trump, pick one, and tried out Biden and are not happy still because the economy is not great for a lot of people. Yeah,
look, Bernie is right here. He's quite obviously right. Every poll points to the fact that voters definitely are prioritizing the economy still. This is not to say, and I saw some liberals losing their minds over this, implying that Bernie didn't care about abortion or wasn't invested in women's rights issues because he wanted the Democrats to broaden their messaging to be inclusive of abortion, but not exclusively about abortion. And that's absurd. Democrats have consistently been shooting themselves in the foot by criticizing Bernie and all of the advice that he's giving that he does not have to be offering up to them as an independent senator from Vermont. And they keep losing, and then they turn around and very predictably will blame progressives for their losses, even though they followed a Blue Dog corporate Dem handbook all the way.
It's the whole idea that talking about economic anxiety is a racist dog whistle, which is something many in the mainstream media sincerely believe.
They believe that. They've been pushing that narrative since 2016, and it's absolutely exhausting. Democrats talk out of one side of their mouth about how Black and brown people are disproportionately poor, economically disenfranchised, all of the things, and it is true. And then on the other side of their mouth, they say if you talk about poverty issues, you're a problem. You're a racist. If you on one side of their mouth they say white Americans are so racist that if you describe a policy in racial terms, they're less likely to want to do it. And then if you go ahead and describe that policy not in racial terms, perhaps trying to present how it could be popular, they say, well, it's racist for you not to say specifically how this is a policy that's going to serve these historically marginalized groups. And they box themselves into a corner. There should be different approaches that you're able to take with different audiences. If you go to a Latino community, if you go to a women's group, if you go to a Black community, obviously you should be given if you talk to machinists, you should be talking to the group that's in front of you. But you also have to realize that messaging is going to change when you're talking to a broader audience. And if you believe some truth about how people are less likely to think something is for them, if you describe it in too narrow a way, obviously, it benefits you to talk broadly about the economy because that, of course, is what's hurting these traditionally Democratic-based voters as well as voters as a whole.
Right, because you need voters outside the coalition. I mean, the way that some progressive, mainstream Democratic liberal activists and media people and professors, et cetera, they act like, well, they're just going to be, you get all the woke people to vote and more, ramp up turnout among our, core socially liberal base. And that's just not enough people.
It's not enough
and they're
people.
not concentrated in the areas where it's electorally important to focus.
The Rust Belt in particular, yeah.
Well, former White House press secretary and now MSNBC commentator Jen Psaki recently tweeted this tidbit from a New York Times Siena College poll. Quote, "Holy moly, Siena New York Times poll, more than a third of independent voters and a smaller but noteworthy contingent of Democrats said they were open to supporting candidates who reject the legitimacy of the 2020 election as they focus on economic issues." The poll also found the economy and inflation were top of the mind for voters ahead of November. I mean, I think that just speaks to the fact that a lot of people are not as obsessed with election election stuff, January 6th stuff, Trump stuff, as talking heads on MSNBC.
I mean, think about what she's really saying here. Holy moly. Voters care about the economy, their ability to pay their bills, more than they care about the election being stolen. I mean, what we're really getting to is, would you disqualify a candidate who you otherwise thought was going to help you out economically because they said that the election was stolen? Now,
that's a pretty privileged thing to be able to do.
Exactly.
Right? To have enough.
Exactly. This is not a referendum on whether or not people would prefer a candidate to be an election denier. I think a lot of people would say, all things being equal, they would prefer a candidate who was nice and polite and, had hair and all of the superficial things that people like in their presidential candidates or their political candidates, generally speaking. But if given the choice, if the Republican Party has decided to go all in and basically allow a lot of election deniers in their midst, then a lot of conservative voters are going to be faced with this conundrum. Do they want someone who they think is going to help them better economically, which I would argue Republicans are not going to do, but that's the belief, that there's going to help them economically, or do they want to just stay at home or vote Dem because election denial? Like, that's absurd. And this is exactly why Bernie's right. You have to, at the end of the day, make the case for why your candidate is going to materially improve the lives of the people that you want to vote for them. There's no getting around that. There's no talking about putting rainbow flags on banks and
Ukrainian flags. Don't forget about the Ukrainian flags.
Right. And obviously that's not an indictment.
You think the rainbow flags
LGBT
are getting upstaged by the Ukrainian flags at this point?
I think that the same vendors are making a lot of money selling both to a lot of people who should be concentrating on whether or not they can get candidates running that actually don't take corporate money, aren't able to work in the interest of the American people.
Yeah. Did you see that? I saw
advertising.
some Dem political figure, it actually might have been a progressive one, sharing some group of rainbow flags, for various sexual identities, but they actually left out just the gay one, the regular one.
All right.
I should have said regular. I'm going to get in trouble.
Don't you do this too, Robby? Like, honestly, it's clear as day to me. It's clear as day to me what's happening. Both parties want the conversation to be about culture war stuff that doesn't mean anything. And these voters are telling you in these polls, it doesn't mean as much.
Well, they care about the culture war stuff too.
Well, according to these polls, the voters prioritize the economy.
Absolutely.
And it's a wide open field because no one's really speaking to that issue. Both parties know because they're bought and sold by all of these banks and Wall Street and corporate interests. Neither of them wants to do anything on that score. You have Larry Summers sitting here saying we're going to create a recession. We have to create unemployment. We have to drive people. Like they're saying it out loud that their approach to fixing the economy is going to come at the expense of the broad masses of voters. And because no one is presenting any kind of alternative, they can get away with it because we're spending so much time worrying about people's flags in both directions. So
well, people do and can care about multiple things just in the way that they.
But if they're not,
I think that one of those things is not, except for MSNBC viewers, one of those things is not really election security.
If they're not given the option politically at the ballot box to vote on any of those things, then regardless of what their personal priorities are, the only way that they can express their politics is via the culture wars, which I think is a loss for
right. But I just have to look at a Republican Party that has been incredibly successful in the last few years. And incredibly successful via leaning into that culture war.
Look, I agree.
Yeah.
But the Democrats have been successful for the 20 years prior, pushing similar kinds of things. And was the world better because, You know, we had a Jon Stewart campaign for freedom or whatever he was doing back in the early aughts. And because, you know, look, I think the world is better in terms of we have gay marriage.
To restore sanity,
yeah, that is it. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, we were winning for a long time because we won on the idea that, like, gay people are equal and should get married. And that was a meaningful victory. And that stuff mattered. But the Democrats thought that they could coast on being, like, not vocally explicitly racist and friendly to members of the LGBT community for the rest of all time without offering anything. And now we're seeing what the consequences of that are. And I think the Republicans, your day is going to come too, where people get tired, are desperate and poor and strung out, and they're going to get tired of being offered nothing but.
I hope Republican voters get tired and wake up to the grift going on their own side. I was just seeing criticisms of a Trump-aligned super PAC that takes donations and was saying you have to donate because you're matching funds for the Arizona race. This is, Blake Masters is in this pivotal. He's looking a little behind, but it's a close race. It's very important for conservatives. Donate to Blake Masters, and you can donate to this fund, and this PAC will takes half of it goes to the Trump PAC, and then half of it goes to Blake Masters. Is the clear implication? But if you look very closely, no, 90% of it goes to the Trump PAC, 10% to Blake Masters.
Jeez.
Wake up, Republicans!
Yeah.
It's grift. All right, we'll have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.